The birth of a prince. Every human being is the author of their own health or disease. Buddha, in the 6th century BCE, at the foot of the Himalayas in ancient India, a royal family rejoiced. Queen Maya of the Shakya kingdom, after a prophetic dream of a white elephant, gave birth to a son beneath a sal tree in the gardens of Lumbini. As the baby took his first breath, it is said that the earth trembled, lotus flowers bloomed beneath his tiny feet, and the air was filled with fragrance. The child was named Siddhartha, meaning he who achieves his goal. His family name was Gautama. To his father, King Suddhodana, this child was destined to be a great ruler, a Chakravartin, a universal monarch. But the sages who visited the newborn saw something far greater. One of them, Asita, wept, not in sorrow, but in reverence. "He will not rule the world," Asita said. "He will leave the world. He will become a great teacher, a Buddha." But the king had a different plan. Fearing the prophecy, he surrounded Siddhartha in walls of luxury and illusion, determined to prevent his son from ever knowing suffering, sorrow, or death. And so Siddhartha Gautama grew up in a palace of endless pleasure. Gardens bloomed, musicians played, silk and gold adorned every hall. He had everything, except reality. The 4 sights. The root of suffering is attachment. Buddha. As Siddhartha approached adulthood, he was married to a beautiful princess, Yashodhara, and soon had a son, Rahula. To all appearances, he had the perfect life, but deep within, questions stirred. What lay beyond the palace gates? What was real? At the age of 29, Siddhartha left the palace in secret. His charioteer, Channa, accompanied him. What he saw would change his life and the world forever. The first sight. An old man, bent and fragile. Siddhartha had never seen aging. The second sight. A sick man, coughing, pale. He had never witnessed illness. The third sight. A corpse, lifeless and still. For the first time he faced death. The fourth sight, a wandering ascetic, serene and detached, walking barefoot. In that final image, Siddhartha saw a new path, not one of indulgence, nor ignorance, but one of seeking. Why do we age, fall ill, die, and yet continue to live unaware? Is there a way out of this cycle? He asked himself. That night he kissed his sleeping wife and child goodbye, left behind his princely robes, and vanished into the wilderness. Thus began the great renunciation, the journey toward enlightenment, the search for truth. To understand everything is to forgive everything. Buddha Siddhartha now walked the dusty roads of India, clothed in a simple robe, barefoot with a begging bowl in hand. He wandered from forest to forest, village to village, not as a prince, but as a seeker. He studied under 2 of the most renowned spiritual masters of the time, Alara Kalama, who taught him the realm of infinite consciousness, Udaka Ramaputta, who guided him into even deeper meditative absorption. But Siddhartha soon realized, though he had mastered their techniques, he had not escaped suffering. He was still bound by craving, fear, and impermanence. These teachings lead to serenity, he thought, but not to liberation. Determined, he turned to extreme self-denial, the path of the ascetics. He ate a single grain of rice a day. He held his breath until pain seized his body. He sat unmoving under the sun, the rain, the cold. His body withered. But his insight grew. At the edge of death, Siddhartha realized the truth. Neither indulgence nor self-torture leads to freedom. There is a middle way, he understood, a path of balance, of mindfulness, of clarity. He accepted a bowl of rice milk from a village girl named Sujata, and on that day his strength returned, not just of body, but of purpose. He walked to a place now called Bodh Gaya and sat beneath a great fig tree. "I will not rise from this seat," he vowed, "until I have awakened to the truth, or die in the attempt, the enlightenment." Three things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Buddha. Underneath the Bodhi tree, Siddhartha entered deep meditation. He was determined, unmoving, like a mountain. But he was not alone. Mara, the embodiment of desire and delusion, appeared. He sent his daughters: temptation, fear, doubt. He sent storms, demons, illusions. But Siddhartha remained still. Mara cried, "Who do you think you are to claim awakening? What right do you have?" Siddhartha did not respond. Instead, he touched the earth with his right hand. The earth, it is said, trembled in recognition, bearing witness to his lifetimes of virtue. Mara vanished, and in the silence that followed, Siddhartha Gautama awakened. He saw the world not through ego, but through truth. He realized the Four Noble Truths. Life contains suffering, dukkha. Suffering is caused by craving, tanha. There is a way to end suffering. That way is the Eightfold Path. He saw that all things arise and pass, that nothing is permanent, that freedom lies not in clinging, but in letting go. In that moment, the prince became the Buddha, the awakened one. The first sermon, turning the wheel of Dharma. I teach suffering, its origin, cessation, and the path. That is all I teach. Buddha. After his enlightenment, the Buddha sat in stillness beneath the Bodhi tree for 7 weeks, not in trance, but in deep contemplation of what he had realized. He questioned himself, would people understand this truth? Could anyone grasp a path so subtle, beyond words, beyond belief? At first he considered remaining silent, but then, through deep compassion, he saw the suffering of all beings, and knew he must teach. He rose and walked to the deer park in Sarnath, where 5 former companions had also become ascetics. As the Buddha approached, they tried to ignore him, but something had changed. His calm, his glow, his presence, it radiated peace. They stood in awe. There, under the open sky, the Buddha delivered his first sermon, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion of the wheel of Dharma. He taught the middle way between indulgence and self-mortification. He revealed the 4 noble truths. He outlined the noble Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. These were not commandments, but guides to awaken wisdom and compassion within. Upon hearing this, one of the 5, Kondana, saw clearly. He became the first arahant, the first to realize the truth after the Buddha. The wheel of Dharma had turned and would never stop. The Buddha's journey across India. Thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle. Happiness never decreases by being shared. Buddha. For the next 45 years, the Buddha walked across the plains of India. He taught kings and beggars, merchants and monks, women and children, robbers and scholars. He spoke not of gods or rituals, but of freedom from suffering through inner transformation. His Sangha, the community of monks and nuns, grew by the thousands. They owned nothing, carried nothing, asked for nothing but food and shelter. They walked barefoot in silence, bringing peace where they went. One day, the Buddha met a fearsome killer named Angulimala, a man who had taken 999 lives, wearing their fingers as a necklace. Instead of punishment, the Buddha gave him compassion. Angulimala fell to his knees, wept, and later became a monk, and eventually an arahant. This was the Buddha's power, not to command, but to transform. Hatred does not cease by hatred, he said. Hatred ceases only by love. This is an eternal law. He challenged caste and gender norms, allowing women like Mahapajapati, his aunt and foster mother, to enter the Sangha. He debated with skeptics, questioned dogma, and taught through silence as much as speech. And always he reminded his followers, do not believe anything simply because I say it. Test it. Experience it. Only then will it be yours. He was not a god. He claimed no divine status. He was simply a finger pointing to the moon. The final days, the great passing, Mahaparinirvana. All compounded things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. The Buddha's final words. The Buddha continued teaching well into his 80s. Though his body aged, his presence remained serene, his eyes bright, his speech clear. During his final journey, he fell ill after a meal offered with devotion by a humble blacksmith named Kunda. As his strength faded, the Buddha gathered his disciples beneath the sal trees of Kushinagar. He lay on his right side, facing west, in the lion's posture. The full moon shone overhead. The leaves shimmered. Silence surrounded him. Hundreds of followers wept. But the Buddha smiled. He did not fear death, for he had transcended the illusion of birth and death. Ananda, his faithful attendant, asked, Master, who shall lead us when you are gone? The Buddha replied, Be a lamp unto yourselves. Rely on the Dharma. Rely on yourselves. Work out your salvation with diligence. And with that he entered parinirvana, the final complete liberation. There were no cries of despair, only bows of reverence. The Blessed One had shown the path, walked it fully, and left it open for all beings. The legacy. 2,500 years of the Buddha's light. Over 2,500 years later, the Buddha's light still shines. His legacy lives not in temples, but in every act of compassion, every mindful breath. He didn't ask to be worshipped. He showed us the way. He woke up and reminded us, you can too. In the end, only 3 things matter: how well you lived, how well you loved, and how well you let go. The Buddha.